I told my mother that I was going to play at Freddie Cohen's house, but instead of going over a few blocks in my town, I got on the bus and went to Rutherford, New Jersey, because I had this address, 9 Ridge Road. I just had been exposed to a couple of William Carlos Williams poems as a freshman in high school and really liked it. So I don't know, I got it in my head, hey, it's a famous address. And so I got from the bus station, and I found, it's not a terribly big town, after a little wandering around Ridge Road, found a house, a fairly unassuming house, and I just remember standing out on the sidewalk, not even the sidewalk leading up to the house, but the front sidewalk, paralleling the street, just sort of soaking in this house. That was all I'd really planned to do, and the door seemed to quietly open, or sort of open, and there was a woman at this door who asked if I was looking for someone or anything, and I very shyly I said, no, I just wanted to see the house, and William Carlos Williams was in school. I don't even remember exactly what I said. Well, you're here, why don't you come on in? So yeah, for the next couple of hours, I was talking with Flossie Williams, who was, I think, just so delighted that it wasn't some grad student, for God's sake, looking for PhD material or haunting her premises or asking for an interview. And that was the furthest thing from my mind. And so it was really rather charming. And she was showing me this is where Bill's typewriter was bolted to this desk, this part of the desk. He could flip it over and write his prescriptions. And then we had tea, which I hated then and hate now, but it was wonderful tea under the circumstances. And it occurred to me that I should be leaving, getting back home, since I was really just at the Blob's house a few blocks away. And I copped, I guess, to some version of this, and Flossie Williams said, would you like me to call your mother? Way before Letterman had bad phone calls that he'd make from audience members volunteering, phone calls they couldn't quite just get up to me. Yeah, would you call my mother, Joe Clewell, and Josephine Clewell, and tell her kid lied? So, yeah, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall. I was there, but on both halves of that conversation, it wasn't a long conversation, but she explained the situation and that she would get David back to the bus safely and so on. It was a wonderful teacher, and this was in a freshman English class, and I'd really hated poetry up to that point. And this was the first guy. He was a character of a guy, but with a lot of substance, too. So it was really one of the first teachers I had that wasn't suggesting, we would put on our thinking caps or some version of that and go on a hunt for the meaning of the poem, or that phrase that we've all heard. The hidden meaning is if the poet had something to show you and then put as much shrubbery between you and whatever that was that he could possibly manage. And then this guy was just, we were reading all kinds of great stuff in his English class and Thoreau things and things that he thought might challenge our young and not so nubile minds. And even when we read Williams, we of course looked at those chestnuts of the Red Wheelbarrow and that Apologies for Eating the Plums poem, this is just to say. But we also read, it seemed remarkable to me then, and even more in retrospect, we read Patterson Book 1, which was the first part of Williams's completely nutball, wonderful nutball kitchen sink poem that ended up coming out in 4 or 5, or actually a 6th book part. And I didn't know what was going on, but I knew that I loved it. So somehow it fell under the Williams spell at that point. And that, you could do these kinds of things in poems, and it sounded like the way people actually spoke and so on and so forth. But then that sort of went away for a while. I was reawakened before I got out of high school with another and very different teacher whose approach was the same. Just listen to this. Let's hear how it sounds. It was really the first time I looked at the poem as an organic thing and as a piece of music as much as a piece of content. So then I thought, okay, maybe there's some hope for me as a reader of poetry, because it really did used to send me screaming top speed in the opposite direction. This is not just new in the 20th century, but it really starts hitting its stride in the 20th century. Really what you have, just sticking with American poetry, when you have somebody like Whitman coming along in the middle of the 19th century, and people are scanning out whatever Longfellow they love, and some of it rightly so, but the love song of Hiawatha, by the shores of Gitche Gumee, and it works on that metronome. And then you have this barbarian with, I shout my barbaric yawp over the roofs of the world. What? I'm trying to scan that out again. Now, not that that was a colloquial phrase, but Whitman was one of the first people, Dickinson too, different as they are from each other, that are now saying, let's pay attention to themselves. They're saying, I want to pay attention, or I can't help but pay attention to an American English, the way that you actually hear it, the way that real people actually speak. The diction, those choices of words, but also when it's put together, various rhythms and cadences. And so you have Whitman as this, in virtually any of the poems that he gave that mattered, especially Song of Myself, the colloquial stuff that we would call colloquial phrases, the words that he invents, when he talks about, my bang and my blab, when he says to his mythical or not so mythical son, shoulder your duds, dear boy. Shoulder your duds? It wasn't the King's English. So I don't mean the colloquial was an automatic extension of that, but the commitment was, I want a poem that real people might actually be able to participate in. And so I think I may be oversimplifying here, but I want to make sure we're talking a version of the same language. And of course, it's still not just conversational American English chopped into lines. He's still making a thing. It's a made thing. It does not exist in actual speech, but it's really drawing from there. By the time you get to somebody like Williams, he's learning hugely from the Whitman example. Now, he thinks Whitman is way excessive in a lot of different ways, but that he was absolutely onto something. So when Williams is now talking about the American idiom, and he would repeat versions of that phrase over and over again, it's a similar sort of thing. And you find in Williams' poems the way people actually talk, whether it's on a phone conversation, exchanging things back and forth. And it's not just slang, and it's not just colloquial expressions, but it's not even so much as saying, I'm going to try to use some things, in my case, that is probably an example of phraseology that people use too much, but that I still think that perhaps there's a chance to reinvigorate that same language, that colloquial language isn't dead. It becomes a cliche when it's not showing you anything new. So can you use that language that we speak so often, maybe all the time, but still point it in a new direction, or take it to apply to something that may not be what we usually think of with a given colloquial expression? I know what you mean, or at least I think I know what you mean. If by that you mean, there's some quirkiness, or there's something from the Fringe, or, so yeah, subject matter. And there will be people who will, as in anything, anybody's poems, as if the poem is, as a cigarette is a nicotine delivery system, poem is message or info delivery system, right? Well, yeah, I guess. But I'm not trying to write, when I'm coming out of some of those worlds or images coming out of some of those Fringe places, it's not trying to provide exposition or explication or a Wikipedia entry about spontaneous human combustion or ghosts or flying cars. More than anything else, and this is where I think I can get to your question, sometimes those subjects come up, although I'm convinced, maybe I'm lying to myself, if you actually do a statistical breakdown, it's not a majority, it's not anywhere near a majority of the poems that do that. I think it stays with people because it sometimes, to some people, seems like that's not usually the subject matter of poems. But those poems come from the same place, perhaps, as a poem about a father looking to believe in something, whether it's his plumbing, his ability to fix something, whether it's somebody in the neighborhood figuring out what it's going to take literally to make it, perhaps, from this day to the next. I think what I seem, I guess, to not be able to help being interested in. What do people need to believe? How do people need to believe? Why do people need to believe? And that's what fascinates me. So if I'm coming out of the world of conspiracy theory in some poems, yeah, I'm interested in the subject matter, but I guarantee you I'm more interested still in those that want to make this, in some cases, their life's work. Ditto parapsychological things, ditto some of these other Fringe things too. What does it take? So belief, I guess, it sounds like a grand thing, but as it plays itself out in so many different ways, it's like very early poem of mine having something to do with, somebody uses it, it's your colloquial thing too, a dog bark its head off. I'm talking about these dogs barking their heads off or something. And this kid in the poem said, dog bark its head off? So trying to take that sort of figurative thing literally, what does that mean? Yeah, from very mundane things to, I guess, I don't know, man, the search for God, the search for a big being, that comes up sometimes and sort of. But yeah, that's the subject matter. And people who want to just see it as, it's that freakish subject matter again. It's not, that doesn't hurt me as much as somebody not seeing a line stops and starts. But the real reader that I want is somebody to say, yeah, okay, that's like this. And then when they bring up their analogous this, it has nothing to do with people bursting into flames or 17 people shooting from sewer grates in Dealey Plaza or whatever it may happen to be. Belief. That is probably the number one thing I hear. And the number two thing I hear, read, is that really it's a question that is implicitly in this comment. And the question, I'll get to the question first, is can a poem be humorous and serious at the same time? Is this a humorous poem? Why? People seem not even put off, but perplexed by the notion that, and I'm glad, that they find that there's humor in several of these poems, many of these poems, but also I like that ability to distinguish that, there's humor, but there's humor sometimes in what I think of as the most, serious of circumstances. And this is I think people have a hard time with that. I want to laugh, but it's not funny. Exactly. So how has my work changed? I am more insistent than ever, Jake Little, on that proposition. Because it's necessary and maybe it feeds back in the essay. It helps us survive. So I never want people to confuse seriousness with solemn. But I'm not trying to be a narrator as a stand-up comic sort of guy, cracking wise or cracking jokes either. A good flea market, despite, there's probably a poem in that, right? No. What I'm hoping is there's a $2 Charlie item that hasn't been snapped up yet in that. How's that? That would be one thing. On a completely other hand, a beautiful day on a lake or a river with a fishing line and no rush, and even if there's no fish, there are a number of things. When I start talking about just really losing myself in some Sonny Rollins recordings or other stuff, that's still, that's not about, that's music, there's rhythm, but no, really listening, and again, having the luxury of time, that's the key thing. If I get my time and space, all those things, because I only ever feel like the poetry matters if I'm trying to work on a poem. And so if I run into you at the boardwalk, I didn't run into the poet, nonfiction writer, J. Clewell. I didn't run into the poet, because we got nothing going on, I may run into somebody that I like who does those things, but really, despite some of these overly sensitive souls that want to make every move that they make is somehow part of the writing life, I never assumed that. I'm grateful that I don't feel that way, So, there are many more, but those are three that come very easily, and probably the things I end up doing most often. But you're right. Things in my real non-writing life will end up moving into those situations, absolutely. Because if you're somebody, as a reader or a writer, who wants real human life on a planet, I've only got the evidence in my eyes and ears. It doesn't have to be my experience, but it's still just my eyes and ears and my knowing about some stuff, for sure.